Hello, my name's Matt Corral. I'm the design director for a company called Ultraleap. I work with VR and hand tracking and mid-air haptics. But I've also been a digital or user experience designer for many years. And this is the first in a short series of 5 videos, which is describing the UX design process. Because this is something a few of you have been asking about for a little while. It took me a while to get to it because this is a big one. So we've broken it up over 5 little videos. And this one is the introduction to the overall process. And then in the remaining videos, I'm going to dip into each of the 4 main stages and break them down in more detail for you guys. So the first thing to know about the UX design process is there isn't one set process that you're just going to apply like clockwork every time. It's going to flex, it's going to change a bit, and it'll depend on the kind of thing you're designing, who your colleagues are, the industry you work in, whether you're agency or in-house, or all manner of things. But the good news is that the broad process, the 4 main stages and roughly what you're doing in each one is kind of consistent. And that's what I'm going to teach you today. And then give you some examples, of course, of like the kind of things you might be doing. Also, as a designer, you may not be doing the entire process. It might be that somebody else started out and did the first chunk and you've just been hired for some of it. So it's always worth knowing if you're going to work on a project where you're dipping in. Are you at the start or has something happened first? Are you working with someone else to do a later stage, that kind of thing? It's kind of always worth knowing like where you are on the map. You'll see a bunch of different diagrams and illustrations online that describe the design process, and there are a few little things that come up quite commonly. So I'm just going to show a couple of examples of those in a minute too, and explain why they look the way they do, because my representation is the simplest possible thing we can do. So this here is the way I tend to describe the process. Yep, I've drawn it as a straight line. It's super simple. The key thing to know here is that we are going through a roughly linear process and we break it down into 4 main chunks. Now the names of these chunks will vary everywhere you go. There is no standard naming for these things. I've merely described I've put on the names that I find most useful and descriptive, but don't be fazed if when you get somewhere that they use different terms for these things. It's okay, it's not standard. All that matters is the work we do in each. So I call these phases define, ideate, refine, and build. Define is about doing user research and background work to explore the problem that we are going to solve with our design. So the key thing about define is there's no design work. It's about doing your homework so that you know you are going to design something that really solves a problem for real people. It's about doing that kind of foundation work. Ideate is where we really start getting into creative work. So it's where we come up with a lot of ideas and we do a lot of sketching and we go very creative before deciding what the most promising idea or handful of ideas is to pursue with. Refine is about taking those rough starting concepts, which are probably just a sketch, and doing all the detailed design work to really bring them to life. Prototyping and doing user flows and thinking about accessibility and usability, all of that good stuff. Before starting work with a development team in the build stage who are going to code and actually build the thing for real, and continuing to work with them in partnership until the software product or whatever it is ready. So in the following videos, I'll go into each of those in a bit more detail for you guys, but I also wanted to show some of the other common representations of design process you see, because it can be kind of confusing to see these different diagrams popping up online. So the first one here, this is called the double diamond. I like this one quite a lot, but this one comes from the Design Council, who are a UK organisation who promote design to government and business. So they're very nice people and they help us a lot. This was thought up in around 2005, I believe. The reason that it's got these diamonds is it's really trying to show the kind of thinking you do as you go through the process. So yeah, we go from left to right, but when the diamond is kind of diverging out, that's really describing that user research process at first. The first chunk of the diamond is effectively part of define, before whittling down what we learned about users to get to a decision on the problem we're going to solve with our design project. So the first diamond on the left is really kind of like the define phase I just described to you. And then the second diamond is coming up with a wide range of ideas, which is why it opens up again. before narrowing down again to pick down the winning idea that we're going to pursue and keep working with on our project. So that's like ideate, the second phase that I showed you. So really this is not necessarily showing the entire process, but it's showing the upfront stages that designers will most commonly be working on. And the diamond is really representing the kind of thinking that's going on in each of those stages. In my diagram, I just made a line, I just made it simpler, but it's useful to know this stuff. The other example you might see is something a bit more like a funnel, a bit like this. I'm not sure the origins of this one. I've tried to look it up. My old boss years ago used to use this and refer to it as the innovation funnel. And I think it might come from the worlds of sales or product management, where they would often sort of show funnels to describe almost a certainty in a project. That at the beginning, you don't really know what you're designing, or you're not sure exactly what the outcome's going to be. And over time, you get more and more certain, you figure out more stuff, make more decisions until you're clear what the product is. So really this one, and you'll see it in the shape, is this is kind of showing the tail end of one of those diamonds. It's about going from a wide range of ideas, whittling down to one detailed idea that's ready to launch. So whilst it sort of represents ideate and refine and build, really all the funnel is showing is, if you like, certainty, or the breadth of things that we're working on as a designer before we get down to the best one. The other diagram that pops up a lot, particularly in the software world, is this kind of looping, cyclical thing. You'll see these as loops, or there'll be spirals and other diagrams like that. And this is really representing the iterative nature of design work, that we do tend to work in bursts of sprints or cycles over many different iterations. And in between each loop, we'll get feedback from our client or our customers, or we'll do usability tests and things, and then go back and work on it a bit more. This also has a relation to the world of software development, something called Agile, which I'll get into a little bit more later. But that's again about your software development colleagues also work in a cyclical, structured sort of way, where they work in what's called sprints, which are kind of like 2-week bursts of work. More on that later, but you will see sort of double loops where people try to draw the designers working in their loop and the developers working in theirs together. And that's all good stuff, but just know that this is really describing the tail end of the process, usually refine or build at the end, and trying to describe the iterative nature of it, that you can be working on a design for as many loops as it takes to kind of get it right, necessarily. So all these sketches are really just trying to add on to the method of thinking or the nature of the work in some way, but they all fall into that big, broad process, which is 4 main chapters, where we go from the very, very start, where we haven't decided what we're going to build, go through the process of doing our research, deciding the problem we're going to solve, coming up with a lot of ideas, choosing the best idea, working on it and refining it, and then getting into code, and then finally having a product to launch at the end. So hopefully you guys find that useful and give you a sense of the overall process. What I'm going to do in the next video is dip into the define stage and start to talk about it in more detail.